Welcome and thank you so much for your interest in this workshop series, Retiring on Low Income. My name is Frances Morton Chang, and I'm the Program Manager for the York Region Senior Strategy Team. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to read York Region's land acknowledgement. Land acknowledgements are very important ways to recognize the enduring presence and resilience of Indigenous peoples in this area for time immemorial. Land acknowledgements are also a reminder that we are all accountable to these relationships and have a part to play in reconciliation. So the land acknowledgement, please. We acknowledge that York Region is located on the traditional territory of many Indigenous peoples, including the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, and Métis peoples, and the treaty territories of the Haudenosaunee, Mississaugas of the First Nations, and Williams Treaties First Nations. Today, this area is home to many diverse Indigenous peoples, and we recognize their history, spirituality, culture, and stewardship of this land. We also acknowledge the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation as our closest First Nation community. I will now invite Julie Kissert, Director of Senior Services, to provide welcoming remarks and introductions.
Thank you so much, Frances. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for your interest in this session, Retiring on Low Income. My name is Julie Kissert. I'm the Director of Senior Services in the Community and Health Services Department at York Region. With me here today are members of the York Region Senior Strategy Team that you will now see on your screen. Frances Morton Chang, whom you just met. Frances will be moderating for the moderator for today's session. And Senior Program Analyst Judy Poultis-McLeod, and our data analyst student, Angela Richards. We are very fortunate to have featured speaker John Stapleton here today to share his expertise and deep understanding of benefits for seniors and related considerations for those retiring on low income. As Frances mentioned, midway through John's 5-week virtual series for seniors, pre-seniors, and caregivers, and you are getting a condensed version of that series today. Highlights of the presentation this morning will include: what benefits do seniors get? Understanding personal income tax system. Protecting your retirement. Next slide. It is now my pleasure to introduce John Stapleton, our distinguished presenter. John Stapleton is a social policy expert with over 30 years of experience, and many of these years he spent working in Ontario government as the Ministry of Community and Social Services. John has played a pivotal role in shaping social assistance policy, poverty reduction strategies, and is currently principal at the social policy consultancy, Open Policy Ontario. John has been sharing his in-depth knowledge of the income security system to many different audiences throughout his career. Just to mention a few highlights, John was a member of the Federal Minister Duclos Advisory Committee on Poverty Reduction, the Minister of Community and Social Services Advisory Group on Social Assistance Reform, and City of Toronto's Advisory Group on Poverty Reduction. John has also published op-eds in the Globe and Mail, the National Post, and the Toronto Star. Through Open Policy Ontario, John provides training and resources to help individuals and organizations navigate retiring on low income. The goal of today's session is to enhance knowledge of staff supporting seniors and caregivers about how clients that may be retiring on low income may need to know of how to maximize government benefits and other important considerations. Understanding the unique financial struggles and policy implications for low-income seniors is crucial for providing effective supports and services. In this connection, in March 2024, Regional Council approved the 2024 to 2027 York Region Plan to support seniors. One of the actions in our plan is to communicate information of healthy aging, to raise awareness with seniors, caregivers, and staff to help seniors stay connected and healthy. Today's session with staff supporting seniors, the session sessions John has been shared with seniors and caregivers directly align with this action in understanding the benefits available to seniors and how to access them. So, without further ado, it is my pleasure to turn it over to John to take us through his presentation.
Thanks very much, Julie. And I think the first thing that I want to say this morning is to really emphasize the fact that this is a condensed version. I started doing these at the Toronto Public Library in 2012, and I started with the condensed version. What I realized is that people were often coming back over and over again to hear the same session, and I wondered why they were. And when I asked, they said, because I didn't get it all the first time. So that's why these sessions have been broken down into 5 parts and actually comprise 10 hours of presentations over the 5 weeks. And as was pointed out, we are in the middle of that right now. We have 2 more to go. We started with what seniors get, and that's recorded. We talked about the tax system. Just last week, we talked about protecting your income and your resources in a low-income retirement environment. This Friday, we're going to be talking about coming to Canada as an adult, both immigrants and returning Canadians. We're going to be talking about leaving Canada. What can you take with you? There's an old phrase that says you can't take it with you. Well, when it comes to retirement income, there's some things you can take with you, and that's why it's important to discuss that. And then the 5th week, and I'd encourage people to come to that because I don't really cover it here today, will be an inventory of all the different refundable, non-refundable tax credits, deductions, and other benefits. And I do it for people with seniors and for people with disabilities. So the 5th week, the material that I present here today only covers the first 4 sessions. So let's get to it and move on to the next slide. So here we're talking December 3rd, and this is the title slide for the presentation. So let's move on to the next slide. So I first want to talk to you a bit about what seniors look like in terms of their income. And what you see in these columns here in front of you is the Toronto region, the CMA, Census Metropolitan Area, which is kind of like the GTA, but it's a bit of a tiny jog left to the Census Metropolitan Area. Also includes some places that are not included in the Eastern GTA. It's possible to Google GTA and CMA, and you can see the differences between the two. There are various maps on that. However, what this does is divide all seniors into 10 equal groups. And the numbers in those groups will be different, but it's telling you about what their income is. And if we look at group number 1, which is the poorest 10% of seniors in the Toronto region, you can see that they get very little of their income from employment, from pensions, from investments of various sorts, and get most of their income from old age security, the guaranteed income supplement, the CPP, Canada Pension Plan, and other government transfers. So what are they? They are like GST credit, Trillium benefits, in some cases child benefits, in some rare cases, but also Canada Workers Benefit, that sort of thing. The Climate Action Payment it is prominent there. 16% of their income comes from that. Now let's go way over to the right and look at the equal group of seniors who are the richest group. And you can see that their employment earnings are about 6 times what we see employment of very low income seniors. Obviously, their pension is a very important part of their income. The single largest part of their income comes from investments. And then look at old age security is only a tiny sliver of what the richest seniors get. And so really not much of a concern at all for them. And a little bit from CPP and other government transfers, but investments is their biggest group. Now let's look in the middle at column number 5. And you can see that people are still not earning that much money at all. They're not working. It's our richer seniors who work. And we're starting to see more prominence in pension sources, not very much in investment, and still old age security and GIS and CPP are very, very important. In fact, CPP is the most important income transfer for people in those middle groups. You can see that CPP is 29% for the fifth group and 25% for the other. So this is all to tell you that seniors' income sources, depending on how much money they actually have and how much money they're getting each year, are extremely different. But what we can see is that our lower 5 groups especially rely most of all on government transfers of various sorts. I also want to just point out very briefly, and we'll get to this, that we see the groups that earn the least, in other words, employment income, are in the first 5 columns. And that's where you still see the prominence of the guaranteed income supplement. And that makes a lot of sense because they're experiencing the GIS clawback, and we're going to get into that. It's very, very important part of this presentation. So let's move on to the next slide. Now, what we're seeing on this slide is that in a magic moment in the middle 90s, we had very, very few male and female seniors living in poverty. But as you see, we made huge strides in the 70s, 80s, 90s to bring poverty amongst seniors down. And now we're seeing it creeping up. Of course, we're seeing more women living in poverty. Now, this is based on the low income measure. And the low income measure is a measure of poverty, but it's much more a measure of inequality. And what we see now, especially lately, is that seniors are becoming more unequal. One of the reasons for that, and I won't get into all of them because we got to get through this 2 hours, but one of the reasons for that is that wage increases currently are outstripping CPI, the Consumer Price Index, and seniors' income is increased with the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, but this LIMAT is really half the median income in Canada. And if you're below half the median, you show up in this low-income measure. And what it means is that when we look at the actual poverty line, which is something called the market basket measure, Canada's official poverty line called the MBM, it's a much more a true measure of poverty because it has market basket items in it, food, clothing, footwear, etc., and what those minimal needs are. And so you're going to see the MBM showing far fewer seniors in poverty, whereas the low-income measure, because it's more a measure of inequality, shows more seniors because seniors are on a fixed income, largely speaking. Only 23% of all seniors work in Canada, and as a result, they're not benefiting from those larger pay packet. For example, if you were to take minimum wage from 2007 or so, it's increased at far, far more than the CPI, and certainly wages in wage packets in the post-pandemic period have been far higher than the Consumer Price Index. Next slide, please. And what we see in terms of looking at different cities and looking at a gender analysis, we start to see that across Canada, 87% of men are receiving old age security, but about 28% are receiving the guaranteed income supplement. Of course, with women, They have a higher usage, slightly higher usage of old age security across Canada, but they have a significantly higher use of the guaranteed income supplement. What's that telling you? Two things. It's telling you that men make more money. We already knew that. And that women are living longer, and the longer that you live, and depending on your resources, there's higher poverty amongst females across Canada, and you can see that there are differences across Canada based on immigration and migration. Next slide, please. And please take all of this as an introduction to the topic. I mean, any one of these slides I could do an hour on, but I don't think we all want to hang around here for 60 hours while I did that. The important part of this slide is that Toronto is an outlier. The Toronto region is an outlier. You'll notice in the middle that the Census Metropolitan Area of Toronto, 71% of all our seniors are immigrants. 29% of all our seniors are born here. And I can certainly tell you from the presentations I do in real life around the Toronto region is that the people who walk through the door are decidedly immigrants, racialized, etc. You would not see that in a typical Canadian presentation where 70% of our seniors are non-immigrant, and look at places like Halifax where we have 88% of seniors are non-immigrants. So it's a Toronto's a very different place. Toronto region's a very different place. The only place in Canada that's even close to us is Vancouver, where over half of their seniors are immigrants, but Toronto is certainly on its own in that regard. Next slide, please. So a few things that have happened more recently. One is that back in 2022, seniors who are 75 plus get a 10% increment. So right now, their old age security is $72.57 a month higher than those 65 to 74. Because we've had higher inflation over the last few years, especially in 22, early part of 23, we saw significant increases in CPI, and we also saw increases in seniors' benefits as a result. We had no indexation April to June 2024, and I just want to say this to illustrate a point, is that even though we have quarterly indexation of old age security and the guaranteed income supplement, it's based on a threshold level of inflation. And if we don't reach that threshold in any quarter, then sometimes there are no increases to OAS and GIS. So yes, it has quarterly indexation is the rule, but it sometimes doesn't happen if we have low or negative inflation for a particular 3 month period. So when inflation started to cool down, that's why we got no increases in April to June 2024. And I didn't have to update all of my material, which was let's say selfishly cost me a little bit of less work. The Gains program in Ontario is probably the only pandemic program, pandemic increases that have actually been made permanent. Back at the beginning of the pandemic, the Gains program, which is a small program for very, very poor seniors, was doubled from $83 to $166 a month. And then at the end of the pandemic, it went back down to $83 per month. But the government of Ontario last year decided to repeat the pandemic experience and doubled Gains to $166 a month, and then has now increased it to that. So that's something that should be noted, that although they lowered it back to 87, they've now doubled it again and made some design changes to it. And of course, our minimum wage is now $17.20 an hour. If you go back to early 2007, our minimum wage was $6.85 an hour. So it's almost tripled in that period, and CPI has not tripled in that period. And so once again, it draws the attention to the difference between the poverty measure that we call the low income measure, which is more of an inequality measure, and the market basket measure, which is a truer measure of poverty. And we've had larger increases in wage packets than we have in the CPI. Next slide, please. So what we're going to go through in the next couple of hours is the residency in Canada, what seniors get, what do I mean by a low income? Let's think about taxes, how to reduce taxable income or getting money back, understanding the system, protecting a low income retirement. Why didn't I get this advice from the bank? And then how we spread the word. Next slide, please. Okay. One of the consistent myths when I hear of people who did not apply for their old age security, the three most important reasons are a person will say, I thought you had to be a citizen in order to get old age security. Not true. It's based on residency in Canada. The second reason that's most given to me is I thought I had to work in Canada at least for part of my adult life in order to get old age security. That is also not true. And the third one, and perhaps the one most troublesome of all, is that people say, well, I was waiting for the government to catch up to me, quote unquote. In other words, I didn't think I had to apply. I would just, once I turned 65, they would just start sending me the money. That's also not true. So that's why we see people. So as frontline staff, certainly I ran into a 73-year-old man from India in a shelter. And I said, I went through, why are you not getting old age security? I asked him all about his residency. He should have been receiving old age security. I talked to the worker and said, why didn't you help this fellow applied for old age security? And the answer back was, he said he wasn't eligible for old age security. Well, there's lots of things that people think, but that doesn't mean that they're true. As Mark Twain apparently said, people are not hurt by what they don't know. They're hurt by what they know for sure that just ain't so. And that you'll sometimes find that, especially those people who think they're not eligible. So what are the real rules? You must be 65 years or older. You must have resided in Canada for a minimum of 10 years. For most people, residence defined as ordinary living and making your home in Canada. So what that will usually mean is that you have your PR, your permanent residency, and you have to be a legal resident lawfully in Canada pursuant to immigration laws on the day before the day you are approved. Okay, so yes, some people could be waiting for PR. They could be allowed to stay in Canada and they'd still be eligible to apply for old age security. And in order to get full old age security, the 47 years between your 18th and 65th birthday, breathing Canadian air legally, permanent residency, not citizenship, will get you full old age security. If you have 10 years in Canada, you will, at age 65 or at the time you apply, you will get 1/4 old age security. If you have 20 years, you will get 20/40, in other words, 1/2 of your old age security. But there are 60 agreements in force with Canada where 1 year of residency can qualify for old age security. Others will wait 10 years. A booklet that you're going to be given the link who has the full list of the countries that have social security agreements with Canada. They are reciprocal agreements, which means the following, that if I were to move to that country would give me their version of their old age security program, just as people who move to Canada will get our version of old age security. So about 60 countries sign those reciprocal agreements with Canada, and approximately 140 countries do not have that agreement because they would not provide a Canadian who became a resident of their country with their seniors benefits. And in some cases, they can't even become a permanent resident of another country, depending on the rules of that other country. So 60 have agreements, about 140 do not. Next slide, please. Now, there's also so for people who get very little old age security, there is a super GIS for people with less than 40 years of residency. It's a very complicated formula. On my good days, I can remember it and actually do it on a piece of paper with a calculator. But for example, 11 years in Canada may result in 29/40th super GIS based on a percentage of old age security. So in other words, let's say you only had 1 year in Canada. When you turn 65, you're only going to get 1/40th of OAS, which is only going to be $15 or $16. But then there's an extra guaranteed income supplement that you will get as a result of that. Not a lot of cases get it, and people get it, and part of it that is because sponsorship cases are not eligible for the guaranteed income supplement. The current rule is that no guaranteed income supplement for anyone who is under a sponsorship agreement and B, has less than 10 years of residency in Canada. So we are still waiting with bated breath as to what the government of Canada is actually going to do, because right now sponsorships have been put to 20 years under current sponsorship agreements. But will that mean that someone can get GIS after 10 years, even though their sponsorship is in force? Or will it mean that they have to wait the full 20 years? So we don't know that yet. The government of Canada has not yet made the decision as to what they're going to do. The 20-year sponsorship and the 20-year prohibition on GIS was brought in by Mr. Harper in 2014. We are now 10 years from 2014 and 2024, and we do not yet know whether the law will be put into effect that will disallow sponsored immigrants to receive GIS for the next 10 years. So sponsorships are now 20 years. And remember that super visa residents, which is the route that a lot of people are going now because sponsorships are so hard to get, especially family sponsorships for parents and grandparents, and therefore super visa residents. Super visa is now the way people go in order to get in Canada to be with their loved ones, for their adult children, grandchildren, etc. But they are not eligible for old age security or to build up time in Canada because they're still considered to be visitors. Next slide, please. So there are a couple of phone numbers here. All of the different reciprocal agreements are similar, but they're not the same. So if you've discovered that you have a loved one or you have a client, someone who you're dealing with, who is from a reciprocal agreement country, then then you can call this number that's on the page, either in Canada or outside of Canada, and talk to the expert on the particular country with an agreement, so that you're able to know under what circumstances they're able to get old age security. And of course, non-agreements. So let me give you an example. If someone came from a country like Russia that does not have an agreement with Canada at age 62, they're not going to be eligible for old age security until 72. The reason I mentioned this particular instance is that I got a call from the Toronto Star saying they had somebody who was age 72 in Canada who had come in at the age of 63, and they say, why is this person not eligible for old age security? Well, of course, they had to wait 10 years before they're eligible for it. So they didn't become eligible at 65. And if there's no agreement with Canada, then they have to wait 10 years to apply for old age security. Next slide, please. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what seniors get in Ontario, but I'll first say that the larger sections on coming and going to Canada is this Friday for those who have time and are interested in going into that topic in depth. Next slide, please. So, what do seniors get in Ontario monthly? In no particular order, here's where your money comes from once you become a senior. The first, and again, no particular order, Canada Pension Plan, the CPP, Canada Pension Plan, as most people know, is a payroll tax. If you have earnings and get a T4 slip, then you will have a deduction on your paycheck for the Canada Pension Plan, and then you will get a pension when you apply for it. You can apply as early as age 60. You can apply at any age, 61, 62, 63, 66, 67, at any particular age up to 70, where it maximizes. And if you paid in, you can get a pension. Now, just give you a couple of examples there that if you were to apply for CPP at age 60 to get early CPP, the maximum that you could get is $873.34 a month. Why do you get less? Because you're calling on the program, you're calling to get your benefit earlier, and you're going to be paid for those 5 years that if you waited, you're going to get more money. At 65, you get $1,364.60. If you decide to wait until you're age 70 to get your CPP, which is a good thing if you don't need the CPP money, if you're not missing meals, if you're able to pay your rent, then it's a good thing to wait to get your CPP. If you're in good medical condition, etc., because you're going to get a lot more money, and that's a good thing to do. But if you're low income, you might wish to apply at age 60, and the reason for that is at age 65, your clawback would be on your guaranteed income supplement would obviously be less because there's less money to claw back, but at the same time, you would benefit from getting the pension for the 5 years between 60 and 65. Remember, if you are receiving income from either ODSP, Ontario Disability Supports, or Ontario Works, don't apply for CPP at age 60, or the gross amount will be deducted from your payment. So I'm only talking about people who are low income but are not otherwise on government benefits like OW or ODSP. Second form of income is old age security. Some people call it the pension. Some people just call it OAS. Most people at 65 get this because even though 71% of our seniors are immigrants, most people who are immigrants have the 10 years in Canada, or if they're from an agreement country, they'll at least have 1 year in Canada. So most people do get OAS at 65. There are also some low-income spouses not yet 65. I'm not going to go into that in any great detail because I'm mostly talking about seniors at 65. But old age security right now is $727.67 a month, and it's 10% higher for seniors who are 75 and over. Both Canada Pension Plan and old age security are taxable benefits. You will get, as seniors, you will get a T4A. T4s are for employment. T4As are income that is not employment, but not investment income. So T4A is what you're going to get for CPP, T4As for OAS, and both of them are taxable. The single largest payment in the system, which is the guaranteed income supplement, is tax reportable. You report it on your old age security with your old age security T-slip, but it is not taxable. It's backed out of the calculation of income tax, and therefore you don't pay tax on the GIS. So very important for low income people. There is then a special supplement in Ontario. Most provinces have special provincial supplements called various different things. In Ontario, it's called the GAIN system. This program first came in 1974 in Ontario. And the one big feature of the GAINS program is you cannot apply for it It's based on the GIS that you're getting. So if you're getting GIS, but still below the province's minimum income, you'll get extra money from gains that'll simply show up in your bank account. And just as a rule, that you have to have less than $4,000 a year, 4,000 a year before you're going to get any money from the gains program. But again, don't worry about it. You don't apply for it. It comes with, as a result of your GIS. There's a handshake between the provincial and federal government that the GIS rules automatically invoke the gains payment with an agreement between Ontario and the federal government. Other forms of income that seniors get: income from savings, money you put into an RRSP or a TFSA. And I'm going to tell you about mostly what you'll want to do as a senior is, if you have savings, is to put it into a tax-free savings account. Why? There's no clawback of the GIS when you take money out. And when you take money out, it is not taxable. RRSPs are generally not good for low-income seniors. When they put the money, generally speaking, if you're lower income, when you put the money in before age 65, you get less of a deduction from an RRSP. But when you take it out after age 65, it's not only taxed, but it also claws back the guaranteed income supplement. So, and it does so at a rate that's close to 60%. That's 59%. So you don't want to have too much money in an RRSP once you turn 65. If you have money in an RRSP and you know you're going to get GIS, it's time to take money out of your RRSP. Another form of income that seniors get is private pensions, or pensions from where you worked. And then finally, as I said, 23% of seniors work. An awful lot of seniors who are higher income, that's what the census showed us, is that they stay working if they have higher income. They tend not to work if they have lower income because of the guaranteed income supplement clawback. Next slide, please. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what low income actually means. Next slide, please. And what it means is this. Let's say you're a single person and you get to age 65. If your income, not counting old age security, so let's not count the $7,000 to $8,000 that you'll get from old age security. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But if you have $22,000 of income from all other sources, if you have over that, you're not going to get any GIS. However, if you have less than $22,000 in other income, not counting OAS, then you're going to get some GIS. And if you have no income, then you'll get over $1,000 in GIS. But it's income tested, so the lower your income, the more GIS you're going to get, and it's a non-taxable source. Now, for a couple where they're both getting old age security, then their number below 29,136 of combined income, not counting their OAS, they'll get some GIS. If they have zero income, they'll get full GIS. If they have over 29,000 in other forms of income other than OAS, they will get no GIS. Same couple, only one partner getting old age security. The other partner is under 65. An example would be a 66-year-old woman with a 21-year-old husband. Just a little humor there. If they have income from other sources other than old age security of 52,848 or less, they'll get some GIS. If they get more, then they will get no GIS. And finally, a couple where one partner is getting old age security, in other words, over 65, and the other partner is 60 to 64 and getting something they now call the allowance. It used to be called spouse's allowance. But now if they are together and their outside income other than OAS is less than 40,800, they'll get some GIS, and over that, they will get no GIS. So we use these numbers as what low income specifically means in the context of seniors. And it's really important because really what this whole presentation about is for people who are receiving guaranteed income supplements. So who are we talking about? About close to 8 million seniors get old age security in Canada. About 2.2 million get the guaranteed income supplement. So it's a lot of people getting the guaranteed income supplement in Canada. Next slide, please. So the tax back on guaranteed income supplement, call it a tax back, a recovery rate, a clawback, whatever the term that you use mostly when you talk about tax backs, recoveries, or clawbacks, is 50% on GIS itself. And because of various different add-ons to the GIS over the years, Mr. Harper did one, Mr. Trudeau did one in 2011, and then in 2016, the actual recovery rate or clawback is 59% on other forms of income, such as cash outs of our RSPs, pensions are, and this is why, of course, why I say get out of your RSP before 65 so you won't suffer that clawback. Pensions of various are clawback, CPP, investment income. Wage earnings are treated a little bit differently, and we'll get into that a bit more. There is earnings exemptions. So those of you who are familiar with the earnings exemptions in Ontario Works of $200 a month, of the ODSP earnings exemption that has recently been put to $1,000 per month or $12,000 a year, is actually higher than the earnings exemption on the guaranteed income supplement, which is $5,000 a year. And then there's a recovery rate of 50% on earnings over $5,000 a year. So if you're to make $15,000 in wages, and you're on GIS, then your GIS is going to go down by 5,000 because the first 5,000 is exempt, and then the next 10,000 would be cut by 50%. And honorariums, interestingly enough, are also suffer the GIS clawbacks, and we'll get into that a little bit more. Income from old age security itself does not affect the amount of GIS that a senior receives. Next slide, please. So for those of you who understand and like graphs, and you've seen all your Netflix that you're going to see for the next while, then you can take this graph out on a Saturday night and spend many hours finding out exactly what happened when Mr. Trudeau in 2016 put in something called a further GIS supplement, but did not change the amount of money that that would take you off of GIS, and that's what resulted in the overall 59% clawback rate for non-earners. But it's a complex slide, so I leave it those to you who are mathematically and graphically inclined. Next slide, please. So the earnings exemption for the GIS, in other words, other income is clawed back at 59%, but the earnings are not. The enhanced exemption provides a full exemption on the first $5,000 of employment and self-employment income, an additional 50% on the next 10,000 of earnings. And so I already gave you that example, a maximum exemption of $10,000 on the first $15,000 that someone makes while they're on GIS. Now in 2020, the pandemic year, also the year of 2020 vision and 2020 hindsight, was also extended to the self-employed in 2020. And the clawback was reduced to 50%, as I noted, whereas the clawback can climb over certain zones of income for other forms of income. Again, that's say that more for those of you who are mathematically inclined to understand. Next slide, please. Now there's a test. So get ready, get your papers and pencils, and we'll take you through the test, and we'll see how well you do. And we're going to do it by looking at Tina's story. And Tina is a single mom who receives social assistance from age 18 to 30 Then Tina went back to school, worked as a part-time nurse's assistant from age 30 to 50. She became disabled with multiple sclerosis and received ODSP after age 50, and now she is turning 65. So now we're going to talk about what will Tina get. Next slide, please. So what I want you to do, if I had you in real life in a room, we would hand out desirable prizes, like mouse pads and things like that. But since we're not doing that today, you can test yourself and give yourself your own reward. Maybe it's who knows what your own reward could be, but you should make one up and see how much of this you get. So Tina's Canada pension plan is $364 per month when she turns 65, but the maximum payout per month is $1,364.60. Why does Tina get less Canada pension plan? Okay, for those of you who are testing yourself, you will know that there are two reasons that Tina is not getting the full Canada pension plan, why she's getting less than half the payout. First of all, she did not work throughout her whole working lifetime. So we had Tina only worked in those in that period from 30 to 50. So because she was contributing to CPP for less than her 40 years of earnings that she could work over that period, then she's going to get less money. Reason number two is that Tina, as a nursing assistant, would not be paying the maximum amount of CPP she pays in. There's something called the yearly maximum pensionable earnings. It's an amount, I think, that's close to $60,000 right now, $60,000 a year. So Tina, getting a lower salary during her working years, would not be paying in the amount that she could pay in had she gotten a higher salary and paying in at the maximum. So there are the two reasons that Tina is getting less CPP. So for those of you who are scoring yourself, you have 2 out of 2. Now, third question, old age security is $727.67 per month. The maximum payout per month is $727.67. Why is Tina getting the maximum amount of old age security? Well, the answer is that Tina must have spent 40 of the 47 years between her 18th and 65th birthday breathing Canadian air legally, being in Canada, and being resident here legally, either under permanent residency. She may have got her citizenship. It doesn't matter for OAS purposes, but she would have had her permanent residency for 40 years of those 47 years between 18 and 65. So if you got that right, you're now got 3 out of 3. I'm going to skip over guaranteed income supplement for a moment, and we're going to first ask the question and about the guaranteed annual income system. Now, that amount for gains has recently gone up to 166. So we'll change that in the slide when we turn it over to you. It's hard to keep up with all the things that are changing. But Tina gets 0 from the gain system. And once again, give yourself another point. So those of you who've already got 3 points, you've now got 4 out of 4, because what you've realized is that Tina's income is over $4,000 a year. If you multiply her CPP of 364 times 12, you're already over 4,000. But Tina also had $10 in income from savings and a private pension of $90 a month. So Tina's overall income from other sources is $464 per month, and $464 per month is well over 4,000, over 5,000 a year. So Tina would not get any gains. So you are now 4 for 4 and have answered the answers perfectly. So Tina, as we said, has $10 from savings, $90 from pension, and she also get refundable tax credits. So for 2 more points, you will know, first of all, what the refundable tax credits are. What Tina would get is tax credits from the GSTC, which is the goods and services tax refundable credit. She would have got a climate payment, And Tina also would have received the Trillium payment from the Ontario government. So if you go to all three of those, you get another point. And the second point you can get, which is a more difficult point, is refundable tax credits do not suffer the GIS clawback. There's no clawback of on refundable tax credits. So any of those refundable tax credits that really are like government gift cards don't affect your GIS. Now let's go back for one more point and look at guaranteed and income supplement. Tina is getting $766.93 per month when the maximum amount that Tina could get if she had no income is $1,086.88. So give yourself another extra point if you understood why Tina would not be getting full GIS. She has outside income that is subject to clawback of $464 per month, her $364 in CPP, $10 in savings income, private pension of $90, $464, and you put $464 into the calculator, Tina's going to end up with the guaranteed income supplement of $66.93. Don't try it on your own calculator that you have at home beside you, because you're not going to get that answer because you have different clawback zones, and it's very hard to do. But there is a calculator online, and it's worth looking at. So Tina has average monthly income of about $21,560 per month, total yearly income almost $26,000. So Tina in the Toronto region would be in what we call very shallow poverty. The market basket measure poverty line for a single person is right in about the $26,000 range. So she would be just below it. And so she would be in shallow poverty. I use this example because a lot of the seniors who get GIS are in this shallow poverty. What I mean by shallow poverty is that they're not in deep poverty like a person on OW or homeless or ODSP, but especially OW and homeless we get far less than Tina does. So Tina's making out, she's surviving, but she would still be considered to be just slightly poor. Next slide, please. So there's a new OAS and GIS form, new starting in 2019. And when you fill out the old age security application, which of course you would do once you turn 64 and you're at 64 years and 1 month, you've heard Paul McCartney's song, When I'm 64, people remind you of it. And you get the old age security form. There is a box that says to apply for GIS, complete questions below. And if you do not want to apply for GIS, check the box. For anybody who is anywhere near low income, don't tick the box. Leave the box to the ticks. Just let it go. Let them figure out whether you're eligible for GIS. Next slide, please. A tick box on the old age security GIS form, the application form. If you're low income, don't tick the box. If you're unsure, don't tick the box. No need to worry. Don't tick the box. Just fill it out, answer all the questions, and file your taxes. You still have people who tick the box saying they don't want to apply for old age for the GIS because they don't want to lie on the form and they're not sure whether they're going to be eligible for GIS or not. Don't worry when you go to sign your name and you dating the form, and then it says underneath that if you fill it out incorrectly, you could be found guilty of an offense under the Old Age Security Act. They list about 3 other pieces of legislation. So a lot of low-income people might be looking at that and saying, what is the vision in their mind? And that vision might be the Crowbar Hotel, the Slammer, jail, if I don't fill this out. And so that's not what they're looking for. People who are collecting under false pretenses. They're not thinking about asking the person whether they understand whether they're eligible for GIS or not. So just don't tick the box, as the slide says. Thanks. Next slide, please. So the application for the guaranteed income supplement for when we don't have a postal strike, and again during the postal strike, and I've got this question in the library: what do we do if we're 64 years and 1 month? I'm afraid you're going to have to make arrangements to if you're in the Toronto region to get to Scarborough. It's at Scarborough Town Centre, which is at 401 and McGowan Road, and you can take it into the Service Canada office there, but most of the time you're able to mail it to the, especially if your postal code begins with LM or N, send it into Scarborough. The building's there. I've been in it. It's also a passport office, so it is there, I can assure you of that. And they do take applications there during the postal strike. Otherwise, you might have to go through a private delivery agent like UPS or get in touch with your brother or sister if they're going downtown and say, hey, would you mind delivering this for me? In any event, let's hope it's over soon. Next slide, please. So, what forms of income? This slide's a bit unclear, but I'm going to read them to you anyways. You really want to get seniors who are low-income seniors into forms of income where their GIS is not affected. So we already know that old age security does not affect your GIS clawback. In other words, you need to get old age security just to get GIS, but GIS is not reduced by OAS. Secondly, any money in a tax-free savings account, a cash out from a tax-free savings account does not affect your GIS. So why do you want low-income seniors to be in tax-free savings accounts? Because if they're in an RRSP and they take the money out, then they are going to be subject to both tax and the clawback. Third one is RDSP withdrawals. That's a registered disability savings plan. Someone under the age of 49 who also has a disability tax credit from the federal government can set themselves up in a registered disability savings plan. Money that they take out of that post age 65 is not subject to the GIS clawback. So in other words, they won't lose any money from less GIS. And as I've already told you, refundable tax credits you get with your income tax refunds, such as child benefits, Trillium, the working income tax benefit that they now call the Canada Workers Benefit, and your GST credits. Any money you get from that does not affect your guaranteed income supplement. Next slide, please. So let's say a little bit about, because we've been talking about the difference between RSPs and TFSAs. RSPs came in 1957, so they've been around for a long time. TFSAs didn't come in until 2009, so they haven't been around as long. The way you earn RRSP room, in other words, the amount of money you can put into an RRSP, is 18% of your yearly salary gives you your RRSP room. Okay, and you can build that up over time. You don't lose it. You could build it up over 30 years. That amount is at the bottom of your tax statement. That thing that everybody gets in the mail each year and then puts in a drawer and then can't figure out where they put it into the drawer. But your income tax statement will give you your RRSP room. Similarly, it will also give you your tax-free savings account room. And the way you earn TFSA room is not by working. You earn TFSA room by being in Canada, breathing Canadian air legally. So if you have not put any money into a TFSA, you can now put in about 96,000. I think it goes over 100,000 next year. And you usually accumulate it over the years. The amount you've accumulated has been 5,000, 6,000, went up to 10,000 for a year. And right now it's at $7,000. And each year, as you live in Canada, breathing Canadian air legally, you will with status in Canada, permanent residency status, or ordinarily living in Canada, then you will accumulate tax-free savings account room. And again, it has nothing to do with work and how you earn it. The reason that I have this slide with the RRSP meal and the TFSA meal is if I had a loonie for every person who has professed a belief that you put different things, different forms of income into a TFSA versus an RRSP. That's not true. What you put into an RRSP is exactly the same as what you can put into a TFSA. It's just the rules surrounding how you get the room to put money in are different, as I just noted. So you can put in cash, GICs, bonds, stocks, exchange traded funds in your RRSP. You can do the same thing with a tax-free savings account. And again, you would want, so the only way in which TFSAs and RRSPs are the same as they're both tax instruments, money inside them grows tax-free, and the money that you can put into them in the different forms of money is also the same, that the way you earn them is quite different. Just a note, my own brother moved back from overseas after working abroad for most of his life in 2019 and said, oh, I heard about this thing called a TFSA and I can put about $80,000 in it. I'm going to go out and do that. And I said, well, sorry, you're not. The only way you can put money into a TFSA is living in Canada. So I said, the only amount you're going to be able to put in is for the year 2019. And then subsequently, while you're here, you'll continue to earn the room. But he didn't earn any room between 2009 when the program started and 2019 because he wasn't here. You have to be in Canada legally to earn TFSA room. Next slide, please. So what does taxable income mean? So we're going to spend a little bit of time here before we go to our break to talk about the tax system. So we'll do that for about the next 15 minutes. First of all, you need to know that your taxable income is the amount on line 26000 of your tax form. In most audiences, what I find is that people no longer use the tax form. They will use either software. They will give their income tax to Uncle Harry to do. They will take it to a community tax filing clinic in the nonprofit sector, or they will go into the mall where there will be people doing taxes at tax time for profit, or they will go to a company like an H&R Block or some other company that does taxation, or they will go to an independent tax professional to get their taxes done. But a lot of people now do not do their own taxes, and they especially don't do them on the tax form. But in any event, we'll get into that a bit, but you pay no tax if your taxable income is about $17,000 and you're under 65. Why? Is because you have a basic personal amount. They don't tax you from the first dollar. But if you're a senior, it's about $22,500. Now, everybody's situation is different because they got different deductions, different credits and that sort of thing. But it's about $22,500. And that's important because there's a lot of people who are low income and don't have a tax liability. And again, one of the big myths, they'll say, well, I didn't file my tax return because I didn't owe them anything. But what is the real answer is that if you don't file your tax return, they owe you money. And for every person, every low-income person that I have met into in the last 12 years who said, I'm scared to file my income taxes because I'm sure that they're going to find that I owe them money, absolutely zero, none, nada, zero people owed money when they finally did their tax return because the value of their credits. And remember, you can take your credits back 8, 9, 10, 11, however many years that you have them. There's no time limit on them, and your benefits you get from the tax system are going to likely, in all but the oddest situations, are going to be more than the money that you would possibly owe them, even for money that you didn't declare. Unless somehow you're in the Panama Papers and you've sent all kinds of money abroad when you won the lottery, they're going to owe you. So there's a little shelf, in a virtual shelf up in Ottawa with your name on it, your social insurance number, and in it, the government places gift cards, and those gift cards have your name on it. And the only way that you get those gift cards is that you file your taxes. Your filing your taxes is an application for the gift cards that low-income people are owed by the government. Next slide, please. So, how to reduce taxable income. Let's go to the next slide. Now, in the tax system, there are various different types of terms that they use. And so most people are not familiar with these terms. So what we're going to do, this happened to me, I guess, about 2014 or 15, about 10 years ago anyways. I went and did one of these seminars in Wood Green Community Services for Wood Green at a library in East York. And I had about 50 people there. I started talking about these items and I saw people glazing over. And I asked the question of the 50 people, how many people did their own taxes, either through software or through the actual tax forms. 8 hands went up. So I had 42 people in the room that didn't fill out their taxes, and I'm trying to tell them about various elements in the tax system. Then I got the idea. I said, how many people in this room shop? Have you ever gone to a grocery store or the drugstore? Well, out of the 50 people, 49 hands went up, and one gentleman apparently had never shopped. Anyways, that's sort of interesting. But anyways, I said, well, now we're going to go to the store, because if you understand shopping, you understand the tax system. You just need to have the right names on things. So when you go to a store and if you're a smart shopper and you go to the drugstore or to the grocery store, you may have, or you may see, or you may use something called a coupon. And a coupon is money off a particular item. Well, in the government store, what we call a coupon in a grocery or a drugstore is called a non-refundable credit. A non-refundable credit is a coupon off your taxes. And if you're lining up for a coupon and somebody is well-dressed, somebody's in a $2,000 suit and somebody else is in a tank top and shorts, do they get different amounts of money? If they get, let's say, a tub of Tide detergent, do they get more money off than the well-dressed person? Well, we all know the answer to that. And everybody in the room knew the answer to that, is that a coupon is the same dollar amount for people rich or poor. Well, in the government store, that's exactly how non-refundable tax credits work. You get the same amount of money off your taxes, regardless of whether you are rich or poor. So the coupon works in the same way. So if you get something and you see the term non-refundable tax credit, think coupon, and the value of your coupon is the same for you, whether you are, if you have high taxes or low taxes, it's the same amount. As long as you pay taxes, you'll get the same amount of money. So it works exactly like a coupon. Similarly, a refundable tax credit is like a gift card. So we all know that when we go to the store, we might have, if we're a smart shopper, we might have a couple of coupons and we might have a couple of gift cards left over from birthday or Christmas or something like that. And we know that we can use the gift card for anything in the store, generally speaking, and we know that we can use the coupon off of particular items. In the government store, your refundable tax credit is exactly like a gift card. So the Trillium, the the goods and services tax credit, the climate credit, the Canada Child Benefit are all like gift cards from the government, and you can spend them on anything you want, wherever you want. The same thing is true in the tax system. Refundable tax credit is actual money, and it's money you get whether or not you pay taxes. So in other words, the low-income person who doesn't owe any taxes still gets refundable tax credits, and therefore people who say, I don't owe them anything, so I'm not going to apply, is the same thing as somebody saying that I'm not going to use these gift cards because I didn't pay for them. Well, if you get a gift card and somebody gives it to you, you can use it. Well, it's the same with the government. They owe you a gift card. So it has nothing to do with whether you pay tax or not. It's being delivered through the tax system. Now, a tax exemption is just money they don't want to know about. So it's money that you don't tell them about, and we'll get into that. Now, perhaps maybe the more difficult concept is a deduction. Not many deductions left in the personal income tax system, and especially not for low-income people. And a deduction is like a variable coupon. What do I mean by a variable coupon? I mean a coupon that is different for you than it is for me, because my tax rate is different from yours, and everybody's tax rate is different from everybody else's, except people who have the exact same amount of income on the same things. So if you were to go into the store, and if a deduction worked like a coupon, here's what would happen. You would go up to the cashier, you would give your coupon into the cashier, and the cashier would look at you and say, how much money did you make last year? You would think, why would you possibly ask me how much money I make last year, or how much? Well, then what's your tax rate? Which you probably wouldn't know what your tax rate is, but the cashier would then have to tell you, I don't know the value of the coupon until you tell me your tax rate. And so let's take it through. 3 people with an RRSP deduction of $10,000. So in other words, each of our 3 people have a deduction of $10,000. Person number 1 has a tax rate of 50%. What is their RRSP deduction worth? Well, it's worth $5,000 to them. Now, our next person has a tax rate, makes less income, and has a tax rate of 20%. What is their $10,000 RRSP deduction worth to them? It's worth $2,000. Our third person has no taxable income. So they have a $10,000 RRSP deduction. What is the deduction worth? It's worth 10,000 times 0. What's 10,000 times 0? Remember, our elementary school math is 0. The tax deduction is worthless to them. And that's why low-income people should not be putting money into RRSPs, because the value of sure, they get the deduction. They'll get a $10,000 deduction, which is worthless. The richer person might get $5,000 back, and our moderate income person might get $2,000 back. So it's a coupon, but it's a coupon that's based on your income. Now, sometimes we see in the real world of stores, they'll have coupons that are worth different amounts of money to different people, depending on their loyalty. In this case, the deduction is, and you have to think of it this way, a deduction is money off your income. So when I ask the question in libraries, and I've done it for 12 years, remember, and I've asked the question, can somebody tell me the difference between a non-refundable tax credit, a deduction, an exemption, and a refundable tax credit? I can tell you that in 140 presentations, 2 people have credibly answered the question, what's the difference between all of them? And both of those people were financial planners with all sorts of letters and degrees and things like that. So it's very difficult for people who have not been totally steeped in this system to understand that. So the most difficult one is the difference between the non-refundable credit and the tax deduction. What is the difference? Non-refundable credit is money off your taxes. A deduction is money off your income. The value of a non-refundable credit is like a coupon, same value to rich and to poor. the deduction, the value is variable, more for the rich, less for the poor. Entitlements are forms of income that are not done through the tax system. So programs like OAS, GIS, EI, CPP, all of those programs are outside of the tax system. They relate to the tax system, but they're not inside the tax system. Refundable credits were brought in Canada in 1978. The very first one was the child tax credit. It was paid once per year, and it was the first gift card that the government gave out through the tax system. In 1976 and 1977, the government studied under Justin's dad the idea, can we pay income security benefits under the tax system? They decided they could, and the first one is 1978. Now, every single income security program, every single new income security program since 1978 has been through a refundable credit until 2020. And that's when the CERB and the CRB were taxable benefits that were not paid under the tax system as refundable credits. They were paid as taxable benefits. So we've seen that for the first time. Next slide, please. So this is all just review. A non-refundable tax credit. Again, next slide. It's like a Government of Canada tax coupon, redeemable for money off your taxes. Money off for those who pay tax, worthless if your income is too low to be paying tax. Over the years, we've had various forms of refundable credits, non-refundable credits like the child fitness credit, the medical expense tax credit, which I'll be talking about not this Friday, but on December 13th. Education tax credit, the transit pass tax credit. The big one that a lot of people get is the charitable donation tax credit. Again, same for rich and poor. And it's a non-refundable credit, money off your taxes. So people who pay no taxes but then get charitable receipts, those receipts are not worth anything to them. The disability tax credit. And the disability tax credit is a non-refundable tax credit. It is a coupon. It's a coupon off your taxes if you meet the disability definition of the federal government. Spousal tax credits, caregiver tax credits, all of those are non-refundable credits. They're all coupons. The rich get their money back from the refund, tend to get their money back at refund time through their non-refundable credits. The poor tend to get their money back through the gift cards, the refundable credits. Next slide, please. There you are, coupon, $7 off Tide. So they do have those. So that's like a store coupon. The other's like a non-refundable credit. You could call this the Tide non-refundable credit. Next slide, please. So in the store, you see lots of kiosks, which give you coupons. And so just think of the government store. They don't have colorful coupons like this, but they do have coupons in the form of those non-refundable credits. Next slide, please. So let's talk about refundable tax credits, the gift cards from the government. They are Government of Canada gift card redeemable for money, tax refundable tax credits payable regardless of tax paid. And some of the forms of those are the GST, HST credits that people get quarterly, the Trillium benefit, which is a combination of the Ontario property and energy tax credit and the sales tax credit, the working income tax benefit, now called the Canada Workers Benefit, and then finally child benefits that took a number of old refundable credits and put them into one they now call the Canada Child Benefit, or CCB. Next slide, please. Lots of refundable tax credits in a store. You see all sorts of, in a kiosk, you'll see all sorts of cards that you can buy that act exactly like refundable credits in the government system. Next slide, please. Tax exemptions, money they don't want to know about. So that's on the next slide, please. Forget about it. It's the Government of Canada exemption. They don't want to know about it. Your racetracks winnings, the sale of your car, garage sale proceeds, reimbursed expenses. Don't put those down on your tax form. If somebody gives you $10 because they think you're a nice person, don't declare it on your income tax. And you can do that legally because they don't want to know about it. Now, sale of a principal residence, you do have to report it now, but it's not taxable. So that's an example of another wrinkle where you do have to report it, but you don't, generally speaking, have to pay any tax on it. Next slide, please. Deductions. Now, deductions, remember, is money off your income. And because it's money off your income, it's going to vary between different people. And we only have two real deductions left for most people. There's lots of deductions for people for investments of various sorts, people who are medical, through various medical treatments, etc. There's deductions there, which I'm going to get again on Friday the 13th. It's a good time to go to your Zoom on Friday the 13th because it's not a good day for travel, I hear. In any event, RSPs and childcare are the two big deductions, and it means that, let's say, if you have $60,000 in income, if you get a $10,000 RSP deduction, it takes your income to $50,000. If you have another $10,000 in childcare, it will take your income reportable to $40,000. So in other words, you're taxed on the amount of your income. So let's go on to the next slide. And I like to talk a little bit about certificate of possession, and I like to especially do it with people who are coming to Canada as adults. 71% of our seniors come from different countries, and often they have different views in terms of who owns things. Well, we live in an ownership society in Canada. That's not always known by people who come from other lands. And so I'm saying, hey, these programs, these entitlements you get, you own them. They're not a privilege. They're something that you have qualified for, and it means that you do own it. So let's move on to the next slide. And one thing I really find in doing these over the years is that people often think if they own something, that it means that they have no further responsibilities. So let me give you the example of vehicle ownership. If you're driving your car and you suddenly see in your rear view mirror, you see some lights go on and it looks like a police car, and no matter where you go, the lights follow you, and so you slow down and you stop, and the officer comes over to your car, you wheel down the window. The officer is going to ask you almost invariably for three things. Number one, you're going to be asked for your license. Number two, you're going to be asked for your ownership, your vehicle registration. And number three, you're going to be asked for your certificate of insurance. Well, at that point, I can almost guarantee you don't look up at the officer and smile and say, "I'm sorry, officer, but I own my vehicle. So why are you asking me for these things?" I don't know how the conversation would go from there, but what I'm trying to tell you is, even if you own something, you still have to keep it up to date. You have to have your license up to date. You have to have your ownership up to date, and you have to have your insurance up to date, and be able to show it and be able to show documentary evidence. The same thing is true for your government benefits. Number one, you must apply for them. You are not, in most cases, gains is an obvious example of an exception, but you still had to apply for your GIS to get the gains program if you get very low income. But generally speaking, you have to apply. And so it's an important thing to tell, especially seniors who are coming into benefits. In the last week, I have personally come into contact through other people, two 64-year-olds who, guess what, had not yet applied for their old age security. not a good idea for people who are eligible for it. You have to apply for it. And just like I told you that for refundable credits, the government will go back many, many years to give you your gift cards back, as many years that you haven't applied taxes. But it doesn't work that way for benefits. You get 11 months. They will go back on your old age security, 11 months, CPP, 11 months. So if you decide that the government is going to catch up to you and you're 67 years old and you suddenly decide you want your old age security, they're only going to pay it back 11 months till you're 66. They're not going to take it right back to 65. So it's really important to apply when you should apply. Then you have to meet ongoing eligibility requirements. One real great way to do that is to file your tax return every year. And that's the point right underneath. Make sure your documentary evidence is in order. If you have a birth certificate that has one date, and then you have another date with the federal government that says a different date, you're going to have trouble getting old age security. So make sure all your documentary evidence has the same dates on it, especially for your date of birth. You have to show your documentation and you have to update it. Next slide, please. So what is a refund? Let's go back to the store. When we go into the store and we're thinking about buying something, and let's say we have a couple of coupons and we have a couple of gift cards, and then we have some special coupons that are variable, that perhaps based on our loyalty. You go into the store and you buy $50 worth of stuff, and you have $40 worth of coupons and gift cards. You're going to have to pay them an extra $10. Well, that's the same thing as in the government store, is if the value of all your coupons and gift cards come up to less than you owe them, then you have to pay them at tax time, which is April 30th in Canada. On the other hand, if you go to the store and you have gift cards and coupons that exceed the amount of money that you owe, then you will have you will have extra money left over that you can use next time you go to the store. Same thing is true. Think of it that way for the government, is what you have in your pocket is your refund, and your refund is made up of the value of your coupons and your gift cards and the money that you've already paid through the system. So it works very much the same way.
Welcome back, John. Thank you so much for taking us through all that information. I wonder if now is a good time to respond to the question about, even in Canada, how many people would be considered low income?
Yeah, under the market basket measure, which is the measure that is used by the federal government, we managed to get down during the pandemic, because of pandemic benefits. We got down to 6.4% of Canadians were considered poor. We are now up to 10.2% because all of the pandemic programs stopped in October of 2022. And so we're at 10.2% of Canadians that are low income. Now, amongst seniors, it's a different measure. For seniors, where between 7 and 8% of seniors are considered to be low income if we use the market basket measure. If we use the low income measure, which is more of a measure of inequality than it is poverty, but it is an internationally recognized and an internationally comparable, so we can compare ourselves to other countries. We're up about 11 or 12%. So I think what people who stay interested in this area will see is that there's quite a divergence between our two most recognized poverty measures, the ones that governments use, and people who want to dramatize the points that we have lots of many more poor seniors, they will tend to use the low income measure and then use the MBM if they're trying to, as governments always try to tell us that we're doing better. For York Region itself, I don't have numbers in front of me, but I would bet that you will be a tiny bit better than the national average as it comes to actual seniors' poverty, as measured by the market basket measure, because overall York Region tends to be richer than the rest of Canada. However, you'll probably be up there when it comes to inequality, and the reason is that you have lots of high-end jobs. You have lots of your income levels tend to be high, and as a result, when you look at a comparative measure, you're probably going to be looking at higher amounts of people. Once again, if you use the limb as a poverty line, you'll have more seniors living in poverty. But that's just because other people are doing better. They're doing well, and York Region is doing well from an economic point of view. So that's a pretty good non-answer. On the one hand, it's this, and on the other hand, it's that. One thing I should also tell you that I've been remiss in is that my current position is that I'm the new Social Policy Aging and Wellbeing Fellow at the National Institute of Aging in partnership with the School of Public Policy and Demographic Innovation at Toronto Metropolitan University. So that's a mouthful, but that's a position I've recently taken on.
Thanks so much, John. We're going to let you continue and appreciate that.
Okay, so here's a hot topic, and should you work after 65? So we can go on to we were going to say, should everybody apply for your OAS? This is a real easy one. So let's look at that one slide before we get to work. Yeah. I talked to the people at Old Age Security. There's some people that that won't apply for old age security at 65. If you're higher income, old age security, like CPP, you can put it off and get more money. Of course, you have to be 65 in the case of old age security, and CPP is age 60. But you could put off applying for old age security till age 70. And the caveat is if you're a higher income person. If you need the money, then you're always better off applying for old age security at age 65 if you're low income, and really no exception to that rule. This actually is a seminar or a session, shall we call it, on low income retirement, and people who are low income should not, and I've started to see it now, which is disturbing, is that the people are reading things, or they're talking to financial advisors, or talking to friends and relatives who are putting off applying for old age security because they'll get more money. They're making the bet that they will live longer and therefore end up with more money over the term of their time on the planet. After age 70, that it'll be worthwhile for them. That's not really a good idea for low income people, because the main reason that you would not wait to apply for old age security, of course, is because you're going to get the guaranteed income supplement too. Higher income Canadians don't get the guaranteed income supplement. In fact, a single senior with outside income outside of OAS of $22,000 is not going to get any GIS, and therefore could consider not applying till age 70. Remember, half are enrolled automatically and will receive a letter to this effect. I like to talk about 364-year-olds sitting around at a coffee shop. Senior number 1 has gotten a letter from the government saying to tick a few boxes, and they'll be applying for old age security, so they're auto-enrolled. Others will get letters from programs like ODSP or Ontario Works. Others will get it from a pension program that they're involved in. But the third person sitting there in the coffee shop, also age 64, didn't get a letter. What that person may think, well, I'll just wait till my letter comes in. That if that person is self-employed, they're not going to get a letter because they would have had to send the letter to themselves, and they didn't do it. So if you don't get the letter, make sure at 64 years and 1 month that you're going down in a postal strike. I guess you have to go down to Service Canada, or you can, of course, do it online. You can download the fillable PDF, and PDF means portable document format, so that you're able to fill it out and send it in to the government. People who are having real difficulties in getting the forms either online or through Service Canada can always call their Member of Parliament's office, which is a sort of a last resort to get help doing that sort of thing. So even if you've not been in Canada long, you may get some OAS. And if you qualify for OAS and have low income, you qualify for some GIS. So low income people should always be applying for OAS. Next slide, please. So now we're going to talk about work. Next slide, please. And as I said earlier, once you do all the math on this particular, here's Toronto for 2016. The reason I like using the 2016 is because if I use the previous census in 2021, a lot fewer people were working because of the pandemic. So this is really a truer reflection of how many seniors are working. And you can see that more men work than women. And it's quite striking, actually, 23.1 versus 13.1. And we're seeing that other household types of various sorts, where you have multi-aged people in the household, you can see amongst men, you have more of them working there. So a significant amount of seniors work. Next slide, please. Now, one thing that's really important is to look at take the long view. If we go back about the last 45 to 50 years, we can see that through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, fewer and fewer people were working. In other words, people were taking early retirement. There was all sorts of ads on TV for early retirement. Some of you might recall or have heard of something called Freedom 55, where people were trying to retire by the age of 55 and sort of sit under swaying palm trees and sort of living the good life, playing golf and swimming and sitting in the sun, etc. That whole idea completely changed as we went into the new millennium, and we started to see more and more junior seniors, senior seniors, middle seniors. Didn't matter what group we were talking about, they were all started to work more into their senior years. There's all kinds of reasons for it: better health, better nutrition, people being in better shape when they're 71 versus if we looked 50 years ago. So there's all kinds of reasons for it. Obviously, people need the money, fewer really good pension plans, etc. But that's a real phenomenon. And next slide, please. And you can see, again, if we look at gender, employment with both male and female, you can see at different, it doesn't matter how old you are, you're seeing a rising tide from, and amongst men and amongst women. So one of the phenomena in here that really explains all this is the end of mandatory retirement. Good trivia question, and you can use it. When did mandatory retirement end in Ontario? The answer is 2006 under Dalton McGuinty. And we knew years before that mandatory retirement was going to end. So a lot of the reason that you saw 50 through 65-year-old people ending their work is that their mindset was, it doesn't matter whether I work hard, whether I don't work hard, whether I excel, whether I don't excel, whether I try my best or not the best, at age 65, I'm going to be shown the door. So a lot of people took early retirement because it just didn't matter. They were going to go out the door anyways. Once they understood that they would be able to work after 65, I don't think anybody understood, or policymakers didn't understand, the extent to which people would stay in the labor force if they found out they could. And so that's what's happened. And now we see a lot of people working. Next slide, please. So should you work after 65? And again, here we're talking about low-income people. So any net income reduces the benefits that low-income seniors get, except the $5,000 in net earnings. So you can get GIS, make $5,000, and in earnings, which is only about 1/6 of the minimum wage full time, and not have any clawback. So remember that we have these various seniors benefits, whether gains and GIS both have clawbacks. Gains clawback is 25% now. And so what we see is people, that first slide I showed you, showed that people in the first 5 deciles, in other words, half of seniors, lower income people don't work. And I would say it's largely because of the GIS clawback that they don't, because if you get 50% taken away and then you get another 1.5% with EI, and then you're thinking about all your work expenses, like your transit and travel, your work clothes, your lunches, your breaks, your coffee, your $6 Starbucks, that sort of thing, then it wipes out an awful lot of your earnings. So next slide, please. So I tend to think of it as the family day rule. If you make minimum wage $17.20 an hour and you work the first 7 weeks of the year, that's about $5,000. So after that, every dollar is taxed back at 50%. 75% over some income zones, which if you study that earlier graph I showed you, you can see there's various zones of higher tax back. Not so much for working itself, but most people who work also get money from other sources. And so it's quite, if you're working because you like getting out of the house, you get self-esteem from the work, it keeps you going, you like everything about it, of course, stay working. But just realize that the withdrawal of government benefits is going to be quite onerous over that. So one of the things I like to say is work a little or work a lot. Work a little, meaning work up to the $5,000 or maybe a few thousand higher than that. It won't be too onerous. But, given that the $5,000 exemption is only 1/6 of full-time minimum wage, you might say, well, forget about GIS for my first few years of retirement, maybe from 65 through to 70 or something like that. I'm going to stay working because I enjoy it, because I get out of the house, because I got a little bit of money extra for things and all that sort of thing. And that's absolutely what you should do. Just ignore the GIS program, go out, make the money, and don't get any GIS, and you might well be happier and have more money because of it. But if you're really not going to work very much at all, you don't enjoy it, you're doing it to get extra money because you need it for your family, then I would say, work for the first $5,000 or a couple of thousand more than that, and then call it a day or call it a year, so to speak. Because you should either work, as I said, work a little or work a lot, but don't get caught in that zone where the amount of money that's being recovered from you is very high. And as we saw, on Toronto area seniors who are suffering this GIS clawback, in fact, are not working as much as their richer counterparts. Next slide, please. So I want to tell you a little bit about honorariums. And honorariums that people get, sometimes they get them, they work in a church program or they work in a nonprofit or something. Well, it's not really work. I mean, you're not getting a paycheck. You're not getting CPP and EI and income tax being taxed back from you. You're not getting a paycheck, so to speak, but they give you money out of a cash box, or they give you money as a check to help defray your expenses, as part of many different nonprofit organizations do it. Municipalities do it. And give money to people to help them out with various programs for consultations and that sort of thing. But it's not work in the same sense as being employed. Now, for people who are very low income, who might be on programs like Ontario Disability Support Program or Ontario Works, if they get honorarium, it's considered a gift of small value. And those honorariums are actually fully exempt. So they get a T4 and they might keep it or rip it up or throw it out because they're getting so little taxable money in the first place, they're not going to end up paying tax. And so the T4A that they get doesn't mean much. Here's the story of Philip, who was on ODSP, and he made some money from a group called the Dream Team, where a bunch of people who are psychiatric survivors went out and spoke at various community events and that sort of thing. And because they didn't have much money, they got honoraria from the funder. And so Philip, in this case, he received $1,490 in a particular year in honorarium. And what happened to him? Well, he was very, very poor. He had been homeless most of his life, and he had not worked. And his GIS was clawed back at 50%. His gains was clawed back at 25%. And Philip just gets 25%. So he'd just get 25% of his honorarium, because what happens is that the CRA back in 2013 told all universities, educational institutions, nonprofits, et cetera, that if they gave out honorariums, that if the amount of honorarium was over $500 from any one single source, they would have to issue a T4A. Well, guess what happened? Here's this money that Philip was getting to help defray his travel costs and his meal costs and that sort of thing, maybe some clothing, some nicer clothing. What happens? It all got clawed back off his guaranteed income supplement, which I'm not getting into political things, but it seems to me to be quite unfair, because that money was paid to him to defray expenses, but it was taken off his guaranteed income supplement and his gains payment. Next slide, please. So the T4A trigger point is $500. So one thing you could do is stop collecting honoraria at $499, volunteer for another agent for the next $499. And I'm going to get into the only time when you should be putting money into an RRSP, but that comes a bit later. But about the honorarium, I could tell you, the city of Toronto is the only municipality that I know of that actually puts right on their honorarium form, noting that if the honorarium paid out by the city exceeds $500, then they will prepare a T4A and send it to the person. I don't know if York Region has that on their honorarium form, but it's an important thing to look at, because especially for seniors who are getting their GIS, because that money will be clawed back. And even if you don't send in your T4A, remember that the agency is required to send that information and your name and your social insurance number to the Canada Revenue Agency, and the money will be taken off. So it's actually, I know in a number of cases it is preventing seniors from volunteering, and especially low-income seniors who like to volunteer have stopped volunteering because of that. So it's not a very it seems to me to be somewhat of a short-sighted policy, that when you have money that's really intended just to pay your expenses, but it ends up reducing your guaranteed income supplement. But that's exactly what's happening right now. So it's very important to keep an eye on it for that, especially if those of you who are working in this area and you know of seniors who are volunteering. It's an important thing that to keep track of. Next slide, please. So should you take early CPP? I think we've already covered that, and I think you know that the answer is yes, but let's go on to the next. Yeah, the usual age to take CPP is 65. It's called the normal age of retirement, and early CPP is age 60. So you know that you're going to get, it's a little less money. It's actually 36% less if you take it at 60. Some people take it at 61, 62, 63. No matter what age below 65 you take it, you're going to get a little less money, and you're going to get 36% less money if you take it at age 60. Of course, if you're on social assistance, ODSP or OW, don't take it early. Your social assistance will be clawed back. But run into a lot of people in real life seminars. I met people who age, you get people who are 62 and they're just getting Canada Pension Plan disability, but since they have assets, they're not eligible for ODSP. I've run into people who are working as accountants, do the books for a co-op that they're living in. They're not making very much money, but they're making enough that they can't collect any form of social assistance like OW. They're not disabled, but they're in that situation. Or people on EI, sometimes it's workers' comp. Those are the people that maybe wish to take their CPP early because they do need the money. It means that their lower CPP will result in a lower clawback when they turn 65. But remember, if you're GIS bound, what does that mean? That you know that the amount of money that you're absent winning the lottery or some huge cash for life or something, you're going to be in a position, you know whether you're going to be bound for GIS because you know the amount for a single person is $22,000 if you don't have a pension, if you're getting very little CPP, you know that you'll be below those amounts. You know you're going to be getting the GIS. This is a situation where you're thinking about taking your CPP early. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a bit about what we call the parallel universe of low-income retirement. And in science fiction, we have these things called parallel universe. And the parallel universe is where the type of parallel universe is that I'm thinking of is where everything is the opposite. Up is down, down is up, black is white, white is black, sort of thing. Everything is the opposite. And really it's kind of interesting because really people who are going into low-income retirement, that's 31% of Canadians who would be eligible for GIS. Almost all the mainstream advice, if they were to do the exact opposite of the mainstream advice, they'd be a lot better off. So the mainstream advice says, get RSPs before you're age 65, then cash them out after you're 65 because you get a good deduction. And then when you cash the money out, you're paying less tax. Get TFSAs after you get your RSP because TFSAs don't have a deduction. That's all the mainstream advice that you're going to get. And that mainstream advice actually applies to a majority of Canadians. It applies to 68% of Canadians. But for those who are GIS bound or who are on GIS, then the parallel universe applies. So let's go to the next slide. And what we see, the parallel universe happens because most middle and high income people have less income after they stop working. Most low income people have more. Secondly, most middle and high income people pay less tax after they retire, but most low income people actually don't pay tax or pay very little tax before 65. But then when they move into their senior years, then they start getting income from taxable sources like ODSP, OW are not taxable, CPP and OAS are. Next slide, please. So should you buy RRSPs. So next slide. So again, just to review those different, remember that Ontario Works is non-taxable, ODSP is non-taxable, structured settlements are not taxable, inheritances can be set up to be non-taxable. The only form of income that someone might be had before 65 who is low income might be some minor earnings. Then they turn 65. What happens? OAS is taxable, CPP is taxable, pensions are taxable, RRSP cash outs are taxable, earnings still remain taxable. Any investments are subject to capital gains tax when cashed out. So really, the world before 65 for a low-income person is a largely non-taxed world. When they turn 65, it becomes the world that's subject to taxes. And again, that puts you in that parallel universe where you need to be doing something different. And this is the one instance where you should be buying RRSPs, cash them all out to the amount you can before age 65 if you are GIS bound. And only when your CPP, OAS, and other income means you might have to pay tax. An RRSP can increase your GIS because remember, it's a deduction. So when you take money out of an RRSP, you're going to pay tax on it. Plus, after 65, you're going to be subject to the GIS reduction. Well, it works in reverse. If you start registering for an RRSP for the first time at age 65, or if you have RRSP room that you find at the bottom of your tax statement, your lower taxable income, and I say might increase your GIS, but if you're in the GIS zone and getting some GIS, it will. And you still can buy RRSPs in that window between age 65 and 71. Next slide, please. So if you cash in your RSP before 65, there's a withholding tax on your RRSP of these amounts, 10% up to 5,000, 20%, 5 to 15, and 30% over 15. But remember, if you're low income, that withholding tax is refunded to you if you don't pay tax. But remember, even if you do pay tax, it's still less than the 50% and higher reduction on GIS. So if you cash out of an RSP, maybe you'll pay 10, 15, 20% in taxes. You'll take the tax pain, take that money, put it into tax-free savings account because it's part of your savings. But then when you turn 65 and you still have RRSP room, you might think of putting money into an RRSP because all of a sudden you'll start to get that deduction after age 65. So it really is a parallel universe where everything is opposite, because instead of putting money in, you're taking money out of an RRSP before 65, and then you're starting to put it in between 65 and 71, which is exactly the exact opposite of what somebody who has higher income should be doing. Next slide, please. So your notice of assessment is a gold mine, because at the bottom of your notice of assessment, it's going to tell you your RRSP room and it's going to tell you your TFSA room. And I can tell you that for many low-income Canadians, a lot of them haven't put money into their RRSP because they couldn't afford to, but they've built up a lot of RRSP room, which is now of a real advantage to them once they turn 65, because they can put money into an RRSP and it automatically increases their GIS payments. I've seen many people do it. I've advised people to do it. They've showed me their tax returns after, and then they showed me this much higher GIS that they're getting. And sometimes people got GIS for the first time. I've seen it. I've seen it happen over the years. Next slide, please. So once again, just to review it, before age 65, only your earnings are taxable. If you're low income, especially if you're very low income, but after 65, of course, it's earnings, CPP, OAS, RRSP, cash outs, private pensions, investment income are all taxable. So that's why your whereas the person who is higher income is once they retire, they're not getting their salary anymore, and their tax liability is less. For the low income person, it's usually more. So then again, that's why the parallel universe. Next slide, please. So should you buy RSPs? It makes sense for higher income people because they get the deduction. Remember, the lower income people, if you're not paying tax in the first place, you get the deduction. It's just worthless. So it makes no sense for low income people until they start getting their CPP and OAS to actually start putting money into an RSP. I mean, put it into a TFSA, no brainer, because you're not going to suffer the clawback. Next slide. So there it is. It's people want to know what number the deduction is. It's right on. This is a screenshot of the GIS of the actual application sheet. Number 208 is the RRSP deduction. Next slide, please. So should you save in a TFSA? I think you already know the answer. Tax-free savings accounts are always a good way for low-income people to save. The interest you earn can't be taxed. You don't have to take it out until you want to. And money in a TFSA can't be clawed back. Remember, all RRSPs turn into something called a RIF at age 71. And a RIF, of course, you start to have to take money out in drips and drabs, ever increasing amounts until you're 95 years old. So whereas you're not forced to take money out of an RRSP, once it turns into a RIF, and that happens to all of us at age 71, no exceptions. Probably the only tax rule that has no exceptions. At 71, your RRSP turns into a RIF. And it doesn't matter if you forget about it and try not to tell them. They're going to get in touch with you and say, guess what? You're 71. Your RRSP is turning into a RIF. Next slide, please. So most low-income people who contribute to a registered plan do contribute to a TFSA. I won't take you through all the numbers, but what we're finding is very gratifying that most people don't put any contribution. You can see it's almost 80% of people that low-income people don't put money into any registered instrument, but for those who do, they're mostly putting them into TFSAs, which is a good thing. What you want to do, of course, is at age 71, you want to have an amount of money in your TFSA, the most that you can put in there, and your RSP. So you have a RIF and you'll have a TFSA. And why would you do that? It's because when you need money in an emergency, whether to replace an appliance, your car, or if you have adult children who need money, then that's where it's, you want to be able to take it out of your TFSA because there's no tax implications. Next slide, please. So there you are. Where do you want to save in the TFSA because of the RIF bear hug? What happens at TFSA and when you turn 71? Nothing. You take it out when you want, everything tax-free. TFSAs don't turn into something else at age 71, but in an RSP, it turns into a RIF and you have to start taking money out. Actually, the amounts now post-pandemic are 5% to 20%, and all of it is taxable, and all of it will reduce your RIF. Now, think about what happens to people who are low income who have a RIF only, and then adult children run into problems or your car breaks down. All of a sudden, you need a lot of money, and the only place you can get it is out of your RIF. What happens? The government has its biggest tax and benefit payday when you're having your worst financial crisis. If you're rich and you run into a crisis, what happens? You write a check. Our adult children need money. Write a check. Got to buy a new car. Write a check. But for low-income people, they can't do it. So they got to have money in their TFSA. Don't have money just in your RIF, where the government's going to get its biggest payday when you have your worst financial crisis. Next slide, please. So the RIF withdrawals, here they are. These are correct. 71 starts at 5.28%, right up to age 95, where it's 20%. Next slide, please. So can you leave Canada and collect? Next slide, please. You can collect if you leave Canada. We're going to go into much more detail on Friday for some of you who have the time, inclination to come along. You can collect any form of old age benefits for 6 months. Why can you collect any form of old age benefits 6 months? We sometimes call that the snowbird rule. The people who go to Florida and other places like that, and they generally leave for 6 months' time. But if you move elsewhere for more than 6 months, you need to have lived in Canada for 20 years between your 18th birthday and the date of departure, or you can continue to accumulate years of residence towards portability after you go in to pay for the OAS pension. So let's say you get approved for, you're an immigrant or a returning Canadian, you've been back for 18 years at age 65. If you stay in Canada until age 67, you can take your old age pension with you. So can you take it with you? Yes, you can take taxable benefits with you. You can take your CPP and your OAS with you to another country. But you don't have to have lived in Canada for 20 years if you're from the agreement countries, the 60 countries. Depending on the country you come from, there are 60 agreements, and the URL is there for that. But the point is that if you're from one of those agreement countries, you might be able to take your CPP or OAS out of the country sooner, and that would combine with any pension you have from your home country. But that only applies to countries where Canada has an agreement with the other country. Next slide, please. So there's limited agreements where there's no old age security advantage with two of our largest immigration of immigrant producing countries, which are India and China. And the reason for that is neither India or China will provide old age benefits to a Canadian who decides to and is accepted for residency in India or China. They don't allow their old age benefits to go to Canadians who move there, so we can't sign an agreement with them. Standard agreements, 1 year residency of 10. More recent signatures are Serbia, Brazil, Bulgaria, and Peru. I know that Tunisia, in Africa and Argentina are in the process of or have just completed signing agreements with Canada on this Social Security agreement. I was lucky enough to have been part of a delegation that went to Argentina and Buenos Aires in 2017, and actually one of our meetings, just a fluke, I was actually in a group of people who were talking, they're beginning talks with the Argentinian officials on becoming an agreement country. So that was kind of exciting to be there and part of that. Next slide, please. So your 6 tips for retiring on a low income: file your taxes, unless you're in the Panama Papers, apply for early CPP if you're not on social assistance, apply for old age security a year before you turn 65, and especially if you have any age discrepancies in your documentation, make sure you get rid of those. Don't tick the box for GIS on the application form. Just leave it unticked. Between 65 and 71 buy RSPs if you need to reduce your taxable income to get more GIS and save in a tax-free savings account instead. Next slide, please. So what you need to know: why didn't we get this advice from the bank? Next slide. Banks don't make much money off poor people. You usually have to have $50,000, $60,000 before they'll do a proper investment plan for you. They're not social services agencies. They don't teach bank employees about programs like the Guaranteed Income Supplement, regardless of the fact that 31% of Canadian seniors collect GIS, but banking institutions and other financial institutions don't make money. If you if you need good financial advice, go to an independent financial advisor. Sometimes if you don't have any money to pay for it, you can go through the social services agencies in Toronto. It would be Wood Green or West Neighborhood House. I'm sure there's those in New York region also. If you can pay for it, get an independent financial advisor. Why? Because the independent financial advisor is working for you. The person at the bank is working for the bank. Next slide, please. So how do we spread the word? Last slide, I think. Tell provincial and federal governments to give better information, push institutions to train their staff to give better advice, and teach social agencies about the tax rules and income supports that affect low-income people. Next slide. Thanks very much. And that concludes the formal presentation. Over to you, Francis.
John, what can I say? You've taken so many complex ideas, advice, so many complex terms and an understanding, and distilled it so nicely. I am so thankful that we have it recorded, because even if we heard it once, we'll want to hear it again. So just a note to all the people that have participated today that we have the intention of posting that soon. And just want to really thank you for this opportunity to share. It's so important for our seniors to be well supported, and pre-seniors and caregivers. So very important information. I don't see any questions in the Q&A box. So if Angelina, could you move to the next slide for us, please? Wonderful. Thank you. So before people go, I wonder if you could please take a moment to answer our feedback poll that you'll see on the screen. And I'll just note that John has referenced a few times the different sessions that still remain in our Friday afternoon sessions for seniors, pre-seniors, and caregivers. On December 6th, we are going to be talking more in depth about coming to Canada and leaving Canada. And on December 13th, there will be a more detailed look at tax credits and benefits. I've been told it's like an encyclopedia, line by line. So we're also going to post a link to you to register there if you're interested, or to share with other seniors, pre-seniors that might be interested in attending. So a big thank you, John. All this valuable information. This has been a really great couple of months learning. And I wonder if you wanted to maybe close with a closing thought for us.
Yeah, I think my closing thought is that retiring on a low income is a much more complicated area than people may think it is. Retirement itself is a hugely complex area. I mean, we haven't even got into such issues as assets, liquidity problems. We have, especially in the Toronto region, we have people who are living in $1 million properties who can't pay their property taxes. That's not so much a poverty problem that it is a liquidity problem. And we don't necessarily want them to sell their houses and move in out of their homes when they still wish to live in their homes. So there's lots of things going on there. But it's a complex area. It's worth learning for people who do work in this area. There's lots of stuff to know. Some people have said, well, I'm not going to get any more money. So what can I possibly do? And yeah, but you certainly can find ways to retain the amount of money that you do have and make your retirement a much more pleasant experience than it otherwise would be if you don't have the information. So thanks, Francis.
Pleasure. Can hardly wait to revisit this topic again on Friday. And I wish everybody a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you.